Elena Vasquez sat in the massive council chamber on Nexus Prime, watching the alien delegates argue about trade routes and mining rights. The chamber was enormous, built to hold representatives from over 3,000 different species. Floating platforms held delegates who breathed different gases, while others sat in pools of liquid methane. The diversity was incredible, but Elena felt very alone. She was one of only 3 human representatives in the entire Galactic Council. After 50 years of membership, humanity still held the lowest rank possible. They called it probationary status, which meant humans could attend meetings but had almost no real power. The Zephyrian delegate was speaking now, his crystal body glowing with different colors to show his emotions. Elena had learned to read their color language over the years. Right now he was showing dismissal and contempt. He was talking about Earth's request for expanded mining rights in the Outer Rim territories. The human proposal lacks wisdom, the Zephyrian said, his body flashing orange and red. Their species is still young and impulsive. They have been members for only 50 years. Many of us have been part of this council for over 2,000 years. Elena stood up from her small platform. With respect, Councillor Thexlan, humanity has shown nothing but peaceful intentions during our membership. We have followed every rule and contributed to council projects. Our colonies need those mining rights to support growing populations. The chamber filled with various sounds, clicks, whistles, and electronic tones that served as laughter for different species. Elena felt her face grow hot with embarrassment, but she kept her expression calm. A massive creature from the Bovarian delegation spoke next. Its voice was so deep it made the floor vibrate. The humans speak of need, but what do they offer in return? Their technology is basic. Their ships are slow, their weapons are primitive. They use chemical rockets and metal bullets while we have mastered energy itself. Elena wanted to argue, but she knew it would be pointless. The council had made up their minds about humanity long ago. They saw humans as useful for manual labor and basic manufacturing, nothing more. It was true that human technology seemed simple compared to alien science, but Elena knew there was more to her species than these aliens understood. The vote on Earth's mining proposal was called. Elena watched as the results appeared on the holographic display above the chamber. Out of 2,147 total votes, only 3 supported Earth's request. Those 3 votes belonged to the human delegates. Motion denied, announced the council speaker, a floating, jellyfish-like creature whose tentacles sparkled with electricity. The Outer Rim territories will remain under joint council administration. Elena sat back down, feeling defeated. This was how every human proposal ended. They had been fighting for basic rights for 50 years with almost nothing to show for it. After the session, Elena walked through the corridors of the council building. The architecture was amazing. Halls that defied gravity, walls made of living crystal, and transportation tubes that moved visitors at incredible speeds. But she had seen it all before. The wonder had worn off years ago. She passed by the Memorial Hall, where the council honored important moments in galactic history. One display showed the first contact between the council and various species. Elena stopped at the human section, which was small and tucked away in a corner. The display showed the day 50 years ago when council ships first arrived at Earth. Elena had been just a child then, but she remembered watching the news with her parents. The whole world had been excited and scared at the same time. Humanity was not alone in the universe. What the display did not mention was why the council had come to Earth in the first place. Elena had read the classified reports during her diplomatic training. The council had been monitoring human radio signals for decades before making contact. They were not interested in human music or television shows. They had been listening to military communications from Earth's various wars and conflicts. The council's first report about humanity had used words like tactically creative and strategically unpredictable. They had been fascinated by how humans fought their wars using surprise and clever tricks to defeat larger forces. But once they made contact and saw Earth's relatively simple technology, they decided humans were not as interesting as they had first thought. Elena continued, walking until she reached the observation deck that looked out over Nexus Prime's capital city. The city was beautiful, with towers that reached into the clouds and vehicles that flew in perfect patterns. Everything was orderly and efficient. It was the kind of place that showed what advanced civilizations could accomplish when they worked together. Her communicator beeped with an urgent message. Elena read it and felt her stomach drop. The hegemony of Krex had announced their intention to expand into the New Prosperity system. New Prosperity was a human colony world with over 2 million settlers. It was also supposedly under council protection. Elena rushed back to the council chamber where an emergency session was already underway. The Krex representative, a tall reptilian creature with dark scales and yellow eyes, was addressing the assembly. The hegemony requires the resources of the New Prosperity system for our expansion efforts, the Krex delegate said in his hissing voice. Our surveys show rich mineral deposits and suitable worlds for colonization. The human presence there is minimal and inefficient. Elena stood up quickly. New Prosperity has over 2 million human colonists. They have been there for 15 years and have built thriving communities. You cannot just take their home. The Krex delegate turned his cold yellow eyes toward Elena. The humans may relocate to other worlds. We offer them transportation to any council-approved settlement zone. This is generous, considering their status. Their status? Elena said, her voice rising. They are citizens of a council member species. They have rights. More of that alien laughter filled the chamber. The Bovarian delegate spoke again. Rights must be balanced against needs. The Krex hegemony is a powerful military force that maintains order in 3 sectors. Their expansion serves the greater good of the council. Elena looked around the chamber, desperately. This is wrong. You cannot allow a stronger species to simply take what belongs to a weaker one. What kind of justice is that? The council speaker called for order. The matter will be decided by vote. All in favor of allowing Krex expansion into the New Prosperity system? Elena watched in horror as vote after vote appeared on the display. The final count was 8-47 in favor, 3 opposed. Once again, only the human delegates had voted against. Motion approved, the speaker announced. The Krex hegemony is authorized to proceed with colonization of the New Prosperity system. Human residents will be given 30 days to relocate. Elena felt numb. She had known the council looked down on humanity, but this was worse than she had imagined. They were willing to let humans be driven from their homes simply because the Krex wanted their world. The Krex delegate approached Elena as the session ended. Up close, he was even more intimidating, standing nearly 8 feet tall with powerful muscles under his scaled skin. Do not look so disappointed, little human, he said, his voice full of amusement. Perhaps this will teach your species about your proper place in the galactic order. You are workers and servants, nothing more. It is time you remembered that. Elena met his gaze without flinching. And perhaps you will learn that there are things about humanity you have forgotten. The Krex delegate laughed, a sound like breaking glass. What could we possibly learn from such a primitive species? Your technology is centuries behind ours. Your military is laughable. You have never even fought a real war in space. As he walked away, Elena felt something cold settle in her chest. She thought about those old council reports, the ones that had first brought the aliens to Earth. They had been fascinated by human military communications, but they had forgotten why. They had seen human weapons and decided humans were weak, but they had never understood what they were really looking at. Elena activated her emergency communicator and sent a coded message to Earth. It was time to remind the galaxy exactly what humanity was capable of when pushed too far. Admiral Thekvar of the Krex hegemony stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominator, watching the New Prosperity system grow larger on the main display. Behind him followed 199 other Krex warships, the largest fleet the hegemony had assembled in decades. It was massive overkill for dealing with a human colony, but Thekvar believed in making strong statements. The intelligence reports on human military capabilities made for boring reading. Kinetic weapons that fired metal projectiles. Chemical, rocket engines that moved ships slowly through space. Energy shields that could barely stop a child's toy weapon. The humans had 12 small warships defending New Prosperity, and their largest vessel was smaller than a Krex escort ship. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the Human Defense Fleet," reported his communications officer. "Put it on screen," Tekvar ordered. A human woman appeared on the display. She was young for a military commander, maybe 40 years old, with short dark hair and calm eyes. She wore a simple blue uniform without the elaborate decorations that marked important Krex officers. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Human Space Vessel Defiant. You are entering human territorial space without permission. Please state your intentions." Tekvar laughed, a harsh sound that echoed around the bridge. "I am Admiral Tekvar of the Krex Hegemony. We are here to claim this system by authority of the Galactic Council. You have 30 days to evacuate all human personnel and equipment." Captain Chen's expression did not change. "Admiral, this system contains over 2 million human civilians. We cannot evacuate that many people in 30 days even if we wanted to. I must ask you to reconsider." "The timeline is not negotiable," Tekvar replied. "Begin your evacuation immediately or face the consequences." "And if we refuse?" Tekvar smiled, showing his sharp teeth. "Then you will learn why the Krex hegemony rules 3 sectors of space. Your 12 ships against my 200. The mathematics are simple, even for humans." Captain Chen nodded slowly. "Yes, the mathematics are simple. Thank you for clarifying the situation, Admiral. Chen out." The transmission ended. Tekvar turned to his tactical officer. "What is the status of the human fleet?" "They appear to be moving into defensive positions around the colony world, sir. Standard formation, nothing unusual." Tekvar studied the tactical display. The human ships were arranged in a loose sphere around New Prosperity, exactly what military doctrine suggested for defending a fixed position. It was predictable and boring, just like everything else about human military thinking. "All ships, advance to engagement range," Tekvar ordered. "Maintain wall formation. We will destroy their fleet quickly and efficiently." The Krex fleet moved forward in perfect order, 200 ships arranged in a massive rectangular formation that had served the hegemony well for centuries. Each ship was armed with plasma cannons capable of melting through any known armor. Their shields could absorb tremendous damage. They had conquered dozens of species using this exact same approach. As they approached the human fleet, something unexpected happened. Instead of holding their defensive positions, the human ships suddenly scattered in all directions. Some headed toward the asteroid belt at the edge of the system. Others dove toward New Prosperity's moon. 2 ships actually flew directly toward the system's star. "They are fleeing," laughed the tactical officer. "The cowards are abandoning their colony." But Tekvar was not so sure. He had studied the human files carefully. While their technology was primitive, the reports mentioned their tendency toward tactical unpredictability. This felt like something more than a simple retreat. "Pursue them," he ordered. "Do not let any escape. I want the colonists to see what happens to those who resist the hegemony." The Krex fleet broke formation to chase the fleeing human ships. It seemed logical. Why maintain formation when hunting down scattered opponents? The faster Krex ships pulled ahead, while the heavier vessels fell behind. That was when the real battle began. The first attack came from the asteroid belt. A Krex cruiser was chasing what appeared to be a damaged human vessel when explosions erupted all around it. The asteroids themselves were attacking, launching clouds of metal projectiles that tore through the cruiser's shields. "How are the asteroids shooting at us?" demanded the tactical officer. Before anyone could answer, more reports flooded in. Ships near the moon were under attack by weapons that seemed to fire from the moon's surface. The vessels pursuing humans toward the star found themselves flying through clouds of superheated plasma that had been somehow redirected from the star itself. "It is impossible," Tekvar snarled. "They are using the environment as a weapon." Captain Chen's voice came over the communication system. "Attention, Krex fleet. Welcome to human space warfare. Lesson 1. We do not fight fair." A Krex destroyer near the asteroid belt suddenly lost all power. Its emergency systems activated, and the crew reported that their main reactor had been sabotaged somehow. Similar reports came from ships throughout the fleet. Weapon systems failed, engines shut down, shield generators overloaded. "Sir, the humans are not fighting like any enemy we have faced before," reported the communications officer. "They are using guerrilla tactics." Tekvar had never heard that term before. What are guerrilla tactics? According to our database, it is a human military concept. Small forces use hit-and-run attacks, ambushes, and sabotage to defeat larger armies. They avoid direct confrontation and focus on disrupting enemy operations. On the tactical display, Tekvar watched his superior, fleet being picked apart piece by piece. The humans would appear from behind an asteroid or moon, strike quickly at a single target, then disappear before the Kreks could respond. They used the gravity of planets to accelerate their ships to impossible speeds. They hid in sensor shadows and radiation fields. Worst of all, they seemed to know exactly where each Krek ship would be before it arrived there. "How can they predict our movements?" Tekvar demanded. His tactical officer looked puzzled. "Sir, we are following standard Krek's battle doctrine. All of our maneuvers are described in the official fleet combat manual." Tekvar felt a chill run down his spine. The humans had studied Krek's tactics. They knew exactly how Krek's forces would respond in every situation because the Kreks always followed the same patterns. What the Kreks saw as disciplined military doctrine, the humans saw as predictability. 3 hours into the battle, Tekvar had lost 30 ships without destroying a single human vessel. His fleet was scattered across the system, chasing shadows and fighting an enemy that refused to stand still and fight properly. "Admiral," came Captain Chen's voice again, "are you learning anything interesting? You fight without honor." Tekvar snarled into his communicator, "Face us in open battle." "Honor is a luxury for those who can afford it," Chen replied calmly. "We are fighting for our homes and families. We will use every advantage we can find." Another Krek ship lost power, this one a heavy cruiser that had been pursuing a human vessel through a radiation storm. The humans had somehow weaponized the radiation itself, using it to overload Krek systems while their own ships remained protected. "Sir, I recommend we withdraw and regroup," suggested the tactical officer. "We need time to develop new strategies for fighting this kind of enemy." Tekvar's pride rebelled against the idea of retreating from an inferior force, but he was beginning to understand that the humans were not inferior in the ways that mattered. They might have primitive technology, but their thinking was unlike anything in his experience. "Negative," he said finally. "Send a message to Krek's command. Tell them we need reinforcements and new tactics. The humans are not what our intelligence reports suggested." As if she had heard his thoughts, Captain Chen's voice came over the communication system one more time. "Admiral Tekvar, you came here expecting to fight primitives with simple weapons. But you forgot something important. Humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We have learned that the strongest weapon is not always the biggest gun. Sometimes it is the willingness to think differently." On the tactical display, Tekvar watched as another of his ships went dark, its crew forced to abandon ship after human saboteurs somehow caused their life support to fail. The humans had turned his own superior numbers against him, using the size of his fleet to create confusion and opportunities for attack. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Tekvar was beginning to understand what it meant to be outmatched by an enemy who refused to fight the way wars were supposed to be fought. Dr. Marcus Webb stood in the underground command center on Earth, watching status reports flow across dozens of holographic displays. The facility was hidden deep beneath the Swiss Alps, built during humanity's early years in the Galactic Council, when some people worried that joining an alien federation might not work out well. For 50 years, this command center had been almost empty, monitoring council communications and keeping track of human colonies. But now every workstation was active, staffed by military analysts, intelligence officers, and strategic planners who had been waiting decades for this moment. "Sir, we have confirmation that the Krek's fleet has engaged Captain Chen at New Prosperity," reported Colonel Martinez, Webb's second-in-command. "Early reports suggest the engagement is going according to plan." Webb nodded but kept his expression serious. "And the Council's response?" "No official reaction yet. but our intelligence sources report emergency meetings on Nexus Prime. They seem confused about what is happening. Webb was not surprised. The Galactic Council had spent 50 years believing they understood humanity. They saw human ships and weapons and thought they knew everything about human military capabilities. They had never bothered to study human military history or strategic thinking. "Activate Protocol 7, Webb ordered. "It is time to begin the education." Protocol 7 was part of something called the Terran Doctrine, a comprehensive military strategy that had been developed in secret over the past 30 years. While the Council believed humans were focused on peaceful trade and expansion, a small group of military thinkers had been preparing for exactly this kind of situation. The Terran Doctrine was based on a simple principle. If humanity ever had to fight in space, they would be outnumbered and outgunned by alien forces with superior technology. Therefore, humans would have to fight asymmetrically, using tactics that alien minds might not expect or understand. Across human space, sleeper, agents, and hidden military units received their activation codes. These were not large fleets or massive weapons. Instead, they were small teams of specialists who had been quietly positioned throughout Council territory over the past decades. The first reports came in within hours. A major Zephyrian communication relay in the beta sector suddenly went offline. The crystal beings used a complex network of quantum-entangled crystals to send messages instantly across vast distances. When human technicians examined the damaged relay, they found that someone had introduced a harmonic frequency that shattered the crystals from the inside. In the Gamma sector, automated mining stations belonging to the Altarian Corporation began experiencing mysterious equipment failures. Drilling equipment would suddenly reverse direction. Cargo containers would develop navigation errors and fly off into empty space. Computer systems would crash and display human poetry instead of mining data. The Bovarian trade routes in the Delta sector faced their own problems. Massive cargo ships found their navigation systems giving incorrect readings, causing them to arrive at the wrong destinations. Supply convoys discovered that their food shipments had been contaminated with harmless but terrible-tasting chemicals that made everything inedible. "Sir, we are receiving complaints from 17 different species," reported Colonel Martinez. "They want to know why human workers and technicians are suddenly having so many accidents." Webb smiled grimly. Accidents was one way to describe it. For decades, humans had worked throughout Council space as mechanics, technicians, programmers, and maintenance workers. Alien species considered these jobs beneath them, so they were happy to let humans handle the boring details of keeping their civilization running. What they never realized was that this gave humans access to everything. Human technicians maintained the computers that ran banking systems. Human mechanics serviced the ships that carried vital supplies. Human programmers wrote the software that controlled traffic and communications. The Council had given humanity the keys to their entire civilization and never thought to worry about it. "What is the status of the Krex banking situation?" Webb asked. "Progressing as planned, sir. The Altarian Banking Consortium has frozen all Krex military accounts due to what they believe are computer errors. The Krex cannot pay their soldiers or buy supplies until the problems are fixed." "And how long will it take to fix the problems?" Colonel Martinez grinned. "Our people estimate about 6 months, assuming they can figure out what is wrong. Which they probably cannot, since the errors are actually features we built into their banking software 3 years ago." Webb moved to another display showing the overall strategic situation. Red markers indicated areas where Council operations were experiencing difficulties. There were a lot of red markers, and more appeared every few minutes. "Sir, incoming priority message from Captain Chen," announced a communications officer. Webb accepted the transmission. Captain Chen appeared on the screen looking tired but determined. Behind her, Webb could see the bridge of her ship, with damage control teams working to repair battle damage. "Dr. Webb, we have successfully engaged the Krex fleet. Admiral Thekvar is learning some hard lessons about human tactical thinking. However, I expect the Council will escalate. They will not accept this kind of resistance from a primitive species." "Understood, Captain. How long can you hold the system?" "As long as necessary, sir. The Krex still do not understand what they are facing. They keep trying to fight us like we are another council species, using their standard tactics. But we have been studying their methods for 50 years. We know exactly what they will do before they do it. Webb nodded. Continue the current strategy. Avoid unnecessary casualties, but make sure they understand the cost of underestimating humanity. Yes, sir. Chen out. As the transmission ended, Webb turned his attention to reports from throughout the galaxy. The carefully coordinated campaign was working exactly as planned. Humans were not declaring war or attacking civilian targets. Instead, they were simply demonstrating how deeply integrated into Council civilization they had become. Every day, thousands of Council ships depended on navigation software written by humans. Millions of aliens lived in buildings maintained by human engineers. The entire Council economy relied on communication networks that humans had helped design and build. Now those same humans were showing the Council what happened when that cooperation was withdrawn. Sir, we are receiving a transmission from Ambassador Vasquez on Nexus Prime, reported the communications officer. Elena Vasquez appeared on screen. She was in her quarters at the embassy, and Webb could see that she looked both exhausted and exhilarated. Marcus, the Council is in complete chaos. They are receiving reports of system failures from every sector, but they cannot figure out what is causing them. Some delegates are blaming space pirates. Others think it is a natural phenomenon. Do they suspect human involvement? A few are, starting to make connections, but most refuse to believe that humans could coordinate something this complex. They still think of us as primitive workers, not strategic thinkers. Webb was not surprised. The Council had spent 50 years ignoring human capabilities. It would take time for them to accept that their assumptions were wrong. What about the Krex situation? He asked. Admiral Thekvar has requested reinforcements, but the Krex cannot send them. Their fleet logistics have completely broken down due to the banking problems. They cannot even communicate with their home fleet because their long-range communications keep experiencing mysterious interference. Webb allowed himself a small smile. The Terran doctrine was working perfectly. By targeting infrastructure rather than military forces, humans were achieving strategic paralysis without the massive casualties that would come from direct warfare. Elena, I need you to prepare for the next phase. Soon, the Council will figure out what is happening. When they do, they will demand explanations. And what should I tell them? The truth. That humanity has been preparing for this possibility since we joined the Council. That we understand exactly how fragile their civilization is because we are the ones who help keep it running. And that we are very disappointed in their decision to allow the Krex to steal our colony. Ambassador Vasquez smiled. It will be my pleasure, Marcus. As the transmission ended, Webb looked around the command center. 50 years ago, humanity had joined the Galactic Council hoping for friendship and cooperation. Instead, they had found condescension and dismissal. The Council had treated humans as junior partners at best, useful servants at worst, but humans were patient learners. They had spent those 50 years studying their alien neighbors, learning their weaknesses, understanding their dependencies. The Council thought they were superior because of their advanced technology. They never realized that their technology made them vulnerable to anyone who understood how it worked. Now it was time for the galaxy to learn something new about humanity. They had forgotten why the Council first came to Earth, drawn by intercepted military communications. They had dismissed human tactical creativity as primitive thinking. Webb looked at the strategic display one more time. Across dozens of sectors, the careful work of centuries was being systematically disrupted by small teams of humans who understood that sometimes the most powerful weapon was simply knowing which button not to push. Colonel Martinez, he said, quietly, send a message to all teams. Phase 2 is authorized. It is time to show the Council what human strategic thinking really looks like. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in the organization's 3,000-year history. The massive chamber buzzed with panic as delegates from hundreds of species tried to make sense of reports flooding in from across their territory. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked calmly to the human delegation's platform, her demeanor completely different from the frustrated diplomat who had sat quietly through so many dismissive sessions. Behind her, holographic displays showed the scope of what the council was beginning to understand was a coordinated campaign. The council speaker, its tentacles flickering with nervous electricity, called for order. The chair recognizes the emergency. Nature of current galactic events. Delegates will present their reports in order of sector designation. The Zephyrian representative spoke first, his crystalline body flashing urgent red patterns. The crystal network has suffered catastrophic failures across 17 sectors. Communication delays of up to 6 days are being reported. Our technicians cannot identify the source of the harmonic interference. A massive Bovarian delegate thundered next. Trade routes throughout the Beta and Gamma sectors have become unreliable. Cargo ships are arriving days late or at wrong destinations. Supply chains that have operated flawlessly for centuries are collapsing. The reports continued. Banking systems experiencing inexplicable errors, navigation networks providing false readings, automated mining operations shutting down for no apparent reason, power grids fluctuating despite perfect weather conditions. Elena watched the alien delegates grow more agitated with each report. These were species that had conquered the galaxy through superior technology and careful organization. The idea that their perfect systems could fail so completely was terrifying to them. The pattern is clear, announced the Altarian banking representative, its mechanical voice crackling with static. These are not random failures. Someone is deliberately sabotaging council infrastructure. Murmurs filled the chamber as delegates turned to look at each other suspiciously. The Krex representative, a different one than Elena had dealt with before, stood up on his platform. The hegemony's military operations have been severely impacted, he admitted, his scaled face showing embarrassment. Our fleet at New Prosperity cannot receive reinforcements due to banking and communication failures. Admiral Tekvar reports that human resistance is far more sophisticated than intelligence suggested. Elena stood up slowly. Council Speaker, I request permission to address the Assembly. The chair recognizes the human delegate. Elena activated her personal holographic display, showing a detailed map of the galaxy with thousands of red markers, indicating system failures and operational difficulties. Honored delegates, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. You are witnessing something that should not surprise you if you had bothered to truly study the species you invited to join your council 50 years ago. The chamber fell silent. Even the constant background noise of alien breathing and mechanical systems seemed to quiet. When the council first made contact with Earth, your initial reports described humans as tactically creative and strategically unpredictable. You were fascinated by our military communications because they showed ways of thinking that were new to you. But once you saw our simple technology, you decided we were not worth serious consideration. Elena gestured to the holographic display, which now showed Earth's history of warfare. Images of ancient battles, strategic maps, famous generals, and military academies appeared in sequence. Every human child learns the names Sun Tzu, Alexander, Hannibal, Napoleon, Patton, and Rommel. We study their strategies not because we love war, but because we understand that conflict is inevitable and preparation is survival. You saw our weapons and thought you understood our strength. You never bothered to learn about our minds. The display shifted to show council infrastructure, communication networks, trade routes, power systems, and banking operations. Green lines connected thousands of human workers, technicians, and specialists to critical systems throughout the galaxy. For 50 years, you have treated humans as useful servants. We maintain your computers, repair your ships, and manage your basic operations. You gave us these jobs because you considered them beneath your superior intellects. What you never realized is that this gave us complete access to your civilization. Elena paused, letting that sink in. She could see understanding beginning to dawn on some faces while others still looked confused. You are experiencing system failures because humans are no longer maintaining your systems properly. banking errors because human programmers are no longer fixing the small bugs that accumulate over time, navigation problems because human technicians are no longer calibrating your sensors correctly. The Bavarian delegate interrupted with a thunderous roar. Are you admitting to sabotage? Elena smiled calmly. I'm explaining the natural consequences of treating an entire species as expendable. When you decided to allow the Krex to steal one of our colony worlds, you demonstrated that human welfare means nothing to this council. So we have decided to demonstrate what council civilization looks like without human cooperation. The holographic display now showed specific examples. A Zephyrian communication crystal that had been deliberately tuned to the wrong frequency by a human technician. A Bavarian cargo ship whose navigation computer had been updated with software that contained subtle directional errors. An Altarian bank whose financial algorithms had been modified to freeze accounts under certain conditions. Every failure you are experiencing was planned and coordinated, Elena continued. Not through violence or destruction, but through the simple expedient of humans no longer working to keep your civilization functioning smoothly. The council speaker's tentacles writhed in agitation. This is an act of war. No, Elena replied, firmly. An act of war would be humans using our knowledge of your systems to actually destroy them. We could have caused your ships to crash, your planets to lose power, your banks to delete all financial records. Instead, we chose to educate. She gestured again, and the display showed Admiral Thekvar's fleet at New Prosperity. The Krex ships were scattered throughout the system, many showing signs of damage or systems failures. Admiral Thekvar came to our colony with 200 ships, expecting easy victory over 12 human vessels. He is learning that superior numbers and technology mean nothing against an enemy that refuses to fight by your rules. We have been studying Krex military doctrine for decades. We know exactly how you fight because you always fight the same way. Elena walked to the center of her platform, commanding the attention of the entire chamber. The Krex follow their fleet combat manual precisely. The Zephyrians always prioritize communication over security. The Bavarians value efficiency over flexibility. The Altarians trust their computer systems absolutely. You have become so dependent on your standard procedures that you cannot adapt when someone refuses to follow them. The display now showed human military history in detail. Asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, strategic deception, and psychological operations. Battle after battle, where smaller forces had defeated larger ones through superior planning and unconventional thinking. Humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We learned long ago that victory does not always go to the strongest army. Sometimes it goes to the army that thinks differently. You invited us to join your council because our tactical creativity intrigued you. Then you spent 50 years dismissing that same creativity as primitive thinking. Elena paused and looked directly at the Krex representative. You wanted to teach humans our place in the galactic order. Consider this our response to that lesson. The chamber erupted in angry voices, electronic screeches, and mechanical protests. The council speaker struggled to maintain order as delegates demanded explanations, threatened retaliation, and argued about appropriate responses. Elena waited calmly for the noise to die down before speaking again. The current situation can end immediately. Withdraw Krex forces from the New Prosperity system. Formally recognize human territorial sovereignty. Grant humanity full membership status with equal voting rights. Do this, and human cooperation with council systems will resume. And if we refuse, demanded the Krex representative. Elena's smile was cold. Then you will learn the difference between what we have done so far and what we are actually capable of. You have experienced minor inconveniences caused by human technicians being less careful with their work. You have not yet seen what happens when human strategic thinking is applied with genuine hostile intent. The holographic display showed one final image: Earth itself, surrounded by orbital installations and defensive systems that had somehow escaped council notice for 50 years. We joined your council hoping for friendship and cooperation. Instead, we found condescension and dismissal. You have taught us that in this galaxy, respect must be earned through strength. Very well. We are prepared to demonstrate exactly how strong humanity can be when we stop pretending to be weak. Elena deactivated her display and sat down, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Galactic Council faced a member species that had shown them the fragility of their own power. The vote, when it finally came, was unanimous. But Elena suspected the real lesson was just beginning. Admiral Thekvar floated in the command pod of his damaged flagship, surrounded by the wreckage of his once mighty fleet. 3 weeks had passed since the Krex force arrived at New Prosperity, and what should have been a simple conquest had become a nightmare of confusion and defeat. Of his original 200 ships, 47 had been disabled or destroyed, not through conventional weapons fire, but through tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. The humans used asteroid fields as weapon platforms, turned solar radiation into directed energy attacks, and somehow sabotaged Krex ships from the inside without ever boarding them. "Sir, incoming transmission from the human commander," reported his communications officer, one of the few systems still functioning properly. Captain Sarah Chen appeared on the damaged display screen. Her ship, the Defiant, hung in space nearby, looking battered but operational. Behind her, Thekvar could see the other 11 human vessels maintaining their protective formation around New Prosperity. "Admiral Thekvar," Chen said politely, "I trust you have had time to consider our previous discussions." Thekvar's pride rebelled against everything about this situation. He was a Krex warrior, descendant of a species that had conquered dozens of worlds. The idea of negotiating with an inferior force was humiliating beyond measure. "I do not negotiate with primitives," he snarled. "My reinforcements will arrive soon, and then you will learn the true power of the hegemony." Chen's expression remained calm. "Admiral, your reinforcements cannot come. Your banking systems have been frozen by what your own people believe are computer errors. Your communication networks are experiencing mysterious interference. Your supply ships are arriving at wrong destinations or not at all. You are alone." Thekvar knew she was right. For days he had been trying to contact Krex Command for reinforcements and supplies. Every attempt met with failure or delay. His own fleet could barely coordinate between ships, let alone with forces in other systems. "How?" he demanded. "How is this possible?" "Because you never understood what you were fighting," Chen replied. "You saw our simple weapons and decided we were harmless. You never studied our history or our thinking. You assumed that military strength comes only from superior technology." On his tactical display, Thekvar could see the positions of his remaining ships. They were scattered throughout the system, many operating on emergency power, others completely dead in space. The humans had picked them apart piece by piece using tactics that seemed impossible. "This is not honorable warfare," Thekvar protested. "Honor is something you can afford when you are stronger than your enemy," Chen said. "We are defending our home and families against an invasion force 10 times our size. We will use every advantage we can find." Chen leaned forward slightly, her voice becoming more serious. "Admiral, I am going to offer you a final lesson in human strategic thinking. Watch your sensors." Thekvar looked at his tactical display and felt his blood turn cold. Every single Krex ship in the system was suddenly showing critical life support failures. Emergency alarms sounded throughout his flagship as oxygen levels began dropping. "This is impossible," his tactical officer gasped. "How are they doing this?" On the communication screen, Chen remained calm. "For 3 weeks you have been fighting what you thought was the full extent of human capabilities. You were wrong. Everything you have experienced so far has been a demonstration, not an attack." Thekvar watched in horror as his life support systems continued to fail. Around the system, his other ships were reporting the same problems. Somehow the humans had gained access to every Krex vessel simultaneously. "We could have done this on the first day," Chen continued. "We chose to let you learn instead. Consider this an education in humility." The failing life support systems suddenly restored themselves. Oxygen levels returned to normal, and the emergency alarms stopped. Thekvar realized that the humans had just demonstrated complete control over Krex technology. "How?" he whispered. Because humans built or maintained most of the computer systems in your ships, Chen explained. The Council has been so dependent on human technical workers that you never questioned who had access to your most sensitive systems. Every Krex vessel contains components programmed by humans, maintained by humans, or repaired by humans. Thekvar felt something he had never experienced before: complete helplessness. His superior fleet, his advanced weapons, his tactical training, none of it mattered against an enemy that could control his ships better than he could. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "Complete withdrawal from human space," Chen replied. "Formal recognition of human territorial sovereignty, and a promise that the Krex hegemony will never again attempt to take what belongs to humanity." Thekvar looked around his bridge at his terrified crew. These were warriors who had conquered entire species without mercy. Now they sat helpless, dependent on human mercy for their very survival. "And if I agree, then your ships will be allowed to leave this system safely. Your crews will return home with an important lesson about underestimating opponents, and perhaps the Krex will learn to think before they threaten species they do not understand." Thekvar closed his eyes and tried to salvage some dignity from the situation. "Very well. The hegemony withdraws from this system." 3 days later, Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood before the Galactic Council once again. But this time the chamber was silent and respectful. News of the Krex defeat had spread throughout Council space, along with reports of continued system failures that affected every major species. The Council speaker, its tentacles now a subdued blue color, addressed the Assembly. "The Council has reviewed the recent events involving human territorial disputes and technological demonstrations. In light of new understanding regarding human capabilities and strategic thinking, the following resolutions are hereby adopted." Elena listened as the Council formally granted humanity full membership with equal voting rights, recognized human territorial claims, and established new protocols for interspecies conflict resolution. Everything humanity had been requesting for 50 years was approved unanimously. But Elena knew the real change was deeper than formal resolutions. Throughout the galaxy, alien species were discovering just how dependent they had become on human workers and human knowledge. The comfortable assumption of superiority had been shattered. When the session ended, Elena walked through the same corridors where she had once been ignored and dismissed. Now, alien delegates stepped aside respectfully and asked for her opinions on various matters. The change was remarkable, but Elena felt no satisfaction in it. She stopped at the memorial hall and looked again at the display about first contact with humanity. Soon there would be new entries describing recent events. But Elena hoped the real lesson would be remembered, that true strength came not from the biggest weapons or the most advanced technology, but from the willingness to think differently and adapt to new challenges. Her communicator chimed with a message from Earth. Dr. Marcus Webb appeared on the small screen, looking tired but pleased. "Elena, how are the negotiations proceeding?" "Better than expected, Marcus. The Council has agreed to all our demands, but I think the bigger victory is that they finally understand what they were dealing with all along." Webb smiled. "And Captain Chen?" "Promoted to Admiral and offered command of the new Terran Strategic Institute here on Nexus Prime. The Council wants her to teach other species about human military thinking." "Ironic," Webb observed. 50 years ago, they dismissed human tactical creativity as primitive. Now they want to learn from it." Elena nodded. "The galaxy is changing, Marcus. For the first time, other species are beginning to understand that military strength is not just about having the biggest fleet or the most powerful weapons. Sometimes it is about being willing to fight in ways your enemy does not expect." After the communication ended, Elena made her way to the observation deck that looked out over Nexus Prime. The city looked the same as always, with its impossible towers and perfectly ordered traffic patterns. But something fundamental had changed. Humanity had spent 50 years being dismissed as a minor species useful only for manual labor. Now they were respected as strategic thinkers and military innovators. The transformation had come not through conquest or destruction, but through a careful demonstration of what humans were actually capable of when they stopped pretending to be weak. The Galactic Council had invited humanity to join their civilization, because they were intrigued by human military communications. They had been fascinated by tactical creativity and strategic unpredictability. Then they had spent 50 years ignoring those same qualities. Now they remembered why they had been interested in humans in the first place. Elena smiled as she watched alien ships moving through the space around Nexus Prime. Many of those vessels now carried human advisors and technical specialists, but their role had changed completely. Instead of being servants and maintenance workers, they were respected partners and strategic consultants. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about the danger of underestimating others based on incomplete information. Humanity had learned that sometimes the best way to teach was through demonstration rather than explanation. And somewhere in the new prosperity system, Admiral Sarah Chen was establishing the Terran Strategic Institute, where alien military officers would come to learn that the most powerful weapon in any arsenal was the willingness to think beyond conventional wisdom. The age of human servitude was over. The age of human partnership had begun.